for joining us. Thank you for joining us as well. My name is Nichelle Grandison. Some of you guys would have known me in different dispensations, whether ex-co-worker, friend, consultant, BSI enthusiast. Yeah, I would have met a lot of you on LinkedIn as well. So this is me putting a face to the name. So I'm the founder of Strategy Plus Consulting, which is the only authorized global partner for the Caribbean region. Here for a balanced scorecard. And if you're following us on LinkedIn, you would have seen some highlights about Strategy Plus and myself, so I won't go over that. And most important, about the 2022 Annual Caribbean Strategy Summit. So this is the first of our strategy series leading up to that same 2022 summit in September 29th and 30th. But look out for more. We're definitely going to have two of the major ones. We're going to have one by Terry, who is the training director, and there's another by the COO of the Balanced Scorecard Institute. But I'll be sure to send out all of those invites, so stay close to your LinkedIn or email. Today, we're going to learn about a one-pager strategy plan that David and Richard promised us. And I know that you guys in your varying positions of leadership or even strategy champions or those responsible for executing strategy in your organizations, you're probably tired and fed up now with all those big binders, Bibles, and manuals. All right, so we look forward to hear from David and Richard. David is the CEO for the Balanced Scorecard Institute, and Richard is one of the senior consultants and senior facilitators who I have grown to know over several courses that we have put on here in Trinidad, but we'll hear more about that later on in the segment, as well as about the summit if you're interested. So without further ado, over to you, David.
Thank you, Nichelle, and welcome everybody. We're happy to be here. We got today's presentation will be about the one-page strategic plan, about one-page balanced strategic plan that, as Nichelle pointed out, we're trying to see if we can improve the way we focus on strategy and how we can, if we can improve the communications message related to our strategy. And it's always a bad idea to when you hand somebody a long narrative, a binder, as Nichelle put it, that's supposed to be your focused strategic plan. It's almost always better to show a simple picture that's easy to understand, and it has a focused message, so we can get our employees to focus on strategy, improve performance, create alignment, all those good things that we're always working on. As she said, I'm David Wolfsey. I'm the CEO of the company. I've been doing balanced scorecard and performance measurement type consulting for I guess 17 years now. So I've been helping organizations like you all with their planning and with their performance measurement, KPI development, things like that. My partner here, Richard Juarez, I'll let him introduce himself. If I've been doing consulting for 17 years, he actually has many more years actually implementing this stuff. So we're a good partnership here. He can tell you all the stories about what goes wrong after the consultants leave. So Richard, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, thanks, David, and good to see you again, Nichelle. But yeah, so my name is Richard Juarez. I'm based out of San Antonio, Texas. It's about 1,000 degrees outside, and I know it's raining quite a bit over there. So hopefully we'll be able to entertain you and keep your minds off of the rain and mine off of the heat. Like David said, I've worked in strategy for quite some time, on the execution side. The most important role I've had that pertains to this is I was the executive director of I established and ran the strategy management office, the PMO, process improvement, and this thing we call business architecture, which is just kicking off when we started that practice. But I actually implemented the methodology that we're going to be talking about today. There are many methodologies out there. I chose BSI's methodology because it was a step-by-step process, and I'll talk about that more at the very end. But it's an approach, it's a methodology. I've seen it implemented and it work, and so I understand all of the hiccups that you can have with getting it done. So feel free to ask me questions. If not today, then in the future, or get in contact with Nichelle if you can't reach me. But I'd be happy to answer any questions and just give you pointers. Again, I've already gone down the path of trying to get this thing implemented. It works, but it requires more than just having a great plan. And I'll talk about that more in a bit. But again, you want to have a plan, the culture. There are many things that make it work, because if not, then it's just a document. So with that said, let's move on.
All right. So again, about the basic outline today, we're going to talk about the benefits to get started. Why do we want to do this? And then Richard will talk you through the entire one-page balanced strategic plan. What are the pieces, the nuts and bolts, and then I'll also talk a little bit about the a disciplined process. We won't go into great detail on the process, but we will just barely touch on that as an introduction to our Balanced Scorecard Essentials class. Okay, so the first question is why should I care about this? What are you trying to accomplish when you're talking about managing strategy? Why do we do that? I've been doing these kinds of presentations for many years now, and I always like to touch on the Airbnb story. Airbnb is when I first showed this, I was in Dubai, and so nowadays when you're traveling, you go to a conference, you can almost always find a hotel, some place to stay using Airbnb rather than just going to the traditional hotel. So the message in 2019, when I first showed this, was that, did you realize that the market value for Airbnb is now worth more than Hilton and Hyatt combined? So the message in 2019 was, if you're going to manage strategy, you have to be aware of that the world is changing and you have to be able to keep up. Well, little did I realize at that point that in I think 2020, the message was COVID, of course, took over the world, and the message was very different. Airbnb was laying off people, and they have since recovered, and they've done very well. They've gone public. They're still very successful. The point here is, though, that if you want to manage strategy, you need a simple message. You need to have a disciplined process for managing strategy so that you can keep up with a changing world. So then on the next slide, we have the next major why in terms of this. Why do we need a framework like this that can be simplified on a single page? And it's because of the focus question. We all live in a world now where we are just inundated with performance information. We might not quite realize it, but every time you pick up your phone, you're tracking your steps, and you're tracking your weight, and you're tracking calories, and you're tracking, you go to work, and we count everything. We count everything that we can possibly count. And at some point it becomes overwhelming. So the point of having a simple picture is that we can simplify and focus our message on a simple story like this, that we have mission and vision. It's very clear what our purpose is and what our picture of the future is. It is aligned with our strategy. We have simple goals or themes that help us, we're not 12 of them, but 2 or 3 or 4 strategic themes. And that strategy is then translated into objectives. And then everything else that we do is aligned, all the actions, all the measures, everything that we do is aligned with that simple list of strategic objectives that are in our system. So this whole one-page strategic plan is designed to reinforce this basic framework, this basic system for connecting the dots between all the various pieces in our strategy. Okay, so now let me hand things off to Richard, and he's going to go through the pieces, the nuts and bolts of one of these one-page balanced strategic plans.
Thank you, David. All right, so let's plug the balanced scorecard. But any methodology that you're utilizing normally consists of 2 pieces. You have the planning and then the management of the plan. And we're all guilty of it. I'm sure we've all worked at an organization where we do great planning or not so great planning, but then we don't really understand how to manage the plan after. So the balanced scorecard, the definition for us, it's both. It's the strategic planning piece and the management of that plan. Both are equally important. So what does this system do? Well, David mentioned it helps us communicate the mission, vision, the strategy to employees and other stakeholders. And the one-page document that we're going to show you does that very cleanly. Too many times we find that organizations struggle to communicate that binder of information, and it'll sit on someone's desk. Even the people that create it rarely go back and read it. Like I mentioned, I was guilty of that before. We had great planning, and it was a beautiful binder with beautiful slides and great thoughts and aspirational goals. But I'll be honest, where I worked at, 12, 15 years ago, we never looked at it. It was just something that every now and then I'd take a glance at different pieces, but it was not communicated very well. And if you wanted to understand it, you had to read the entire binder. We certainly didn't have a one-page document. So a good strategic planning and management system does that. Aligning day-to-day vision to strategy and the work it doesn't end with planning. In other words, in planning, yes, we talk quite a bit about aligning our people, processes, and technology, those types of things. But the reality is once the plan goes live, it's very important on the strategy execution side, on the management side, to manage that alignment. If not, it can quickly disappear. In other words, if we meet as a group and we talk as a team, as a leadership team, and we create a plan, then we hand that plan off to a bunch of folks that don't really understand it, they are going to align the pieces they think they need to align, and because they don't know any better, because no one's managing it. So we start creating silos. So it's very important that your strategic planning and management system aligns the day-to-day work during planning and after. Like I said, if not, people start working in silos and they align what they think they need to align. Prioritization of programs, projects, it's the same thing. We start during planning and it keeps moving and happening after we complete the planning. So if planning takes 2 months or 3 months, well, what happens if 6 months later you have an introduction of 4 or 5 new projects? We need to have a way for capturing all of this. So a good planning and management system does that. And the big one, you can't improve something if you're not measuring it or if you don't understand it. So measuring your performance, the performance of your plan is very important. So a good system, create the plan, and of course we measure the plan. And this is, of course, many organizations struggle with what to measure, which is one of our specialties. But even at BSI, sometimes we struggle with finding the right measure. That is normal. You can be in this field for many years and find that the measures you come up with, you'll change the next day because they're not the greatest or the best ones you've ever seen, or they don't work for you once you start presenting on them. That's okay, and that's something that we all need to understand. That's a part of the maturity process. You always want to find the better measure and keep searching for those better measures, and it's a never-ending process. But a good planning and management system allows for that. It allows for the change after the planning is done. And so each one of these things keeps happening after the planning process is complete. Now, a good strategy management system will connect these high-level elements you see up here, the mission, the vision, the strategy, with what we call high-level strategy. Those elements that break down the mission and the vision, we call those themes. We start breaking those themes down into something that's more specific, and you'll see this in the one-page document, but we call these strategic objectives. Strategic objectives break down the themes. These are continuous improvement outcomes. Think of them as goals that we're trying to accomplish. And those objectives fall on what we call a strategy map, and you'll see that in a bit as well. The strategy map helps us visualize the strategy. So if I were to show someone one document and one document only, excuse me, it would be that one-page document. And then if I really wanted to simplify it, you can even just have the strategy map alone. But you'll see in a minute what a strategy map looks like if you've never seen one. But it's one of the best management tools I've seen come out that helps communicate what the organization is trying to focus on. And as I mentioned, you can, no matter what methodology you use, you're going to have objectives or goals, and we need to measure how we're doing with these things. The reality is the first measures you create will not be perfect, so you're always searching for a better measure, of course. But when you find it, you'll then be able to track your performance. And so again, you don't throw your hands up in the air if your first measures are not the perfect measure for the objective. That's part of the maturity process. We just simply need to create that culture by which we all continuously grow, and the organization needs to mature. So we need to give this time. The connection between these two takes time. Creating goals and objectives is very easy. Measuring them is tricky. So just keep that in mind. Don't feel like you failed if you don't have the perfect measure. Then the fun part, the work. This is what helps us accomplish our objectives, right? All of these projects are initiatives. And of course, these projects and initiatives also move the needle on the measures. If you're finding that your initiatives are not helping you accomplish your objectives, you either have the wrong objectives or the wrong projects. So you have to go back to the to that step to make sure that you're identifying the correct or the proper initiatives and projects. Now, in the balanced scorecard, we use what are called perspectives. These perspectives come from research that was done by Drs. Kaplan and Norton back in the early 90s. What they found is that the top performing organizations saw their organizations through 4 lenses. We now call them perspectives instead of lenses. Point being is the top performing organizations did their planning and managed their operations and always understood the impact of those decisions on these 4 lenses or perspectives. So when applied to planning, it ensures you have a well-balanced strategic plan. Many times, we don't have the time right now to do a quick survey, but many times what we find is that organizations, if they've never used the balanced scorecard, they tend to focus on 2 or 3 of these perspectives and neglect one. And so by having these 4 perspectives, it ensures that you have a good balance of objectives, throughout all four. And if you have a balance of objectives, and chances are you'll have a balance of measures and you'll have a balance of projects throughout these four. So that's one of the elements of the strategic planning, that you have a balance between these four. In the balance scorecard, of course, we have a balance of long and short-term measures or projects, financial, non-financial measures. There are other balances that we look at. But for the most part, when it comes to strategy maps, this is the key here. It's making sure that you have enough objectives throughout your four perspectives to break down those the high-level elements. Now, this is the one-page strategic plan. And what it does, it captures the most important pieces of the strategic plan in one document. Now, here it looks clean, right? Because it's for show. The reality is, if you're using this in real life, you may find that you have more measures or less measures, or too many targets that you can't fit them in. So of course, it's a graphic exercise. You need to pick what's right and what you want to focus on. Use both sides of the paper if you really needed to. But what you want to be able to do is communicate your strategy on one page. If your strategy requires 4 or 5 pages to communicate what we have on here, because you have 50, 60 measures, you definitely have too many measures, or you may have too many initiatives, or too many. If you have too many measures, you may have too many targets. So you may flood this, and it's not that you don't have enough paper to do it, or space. It may be that you simply have too many elements in there, too many measures, for example. So let's talk about the components of this one-page document. Up at the top, you've got the vision, the mission, and again, these are high-level elements. I would say the large majority of organizations have these two statements, with the mission being up at the top for some organizations. If they prioritize it a little higher than their vision, nonprofits tend to do that. They're very mission-focused, but mission and vision can be, you can switch those around depending on how the organization feels. But a vision is a picture of the future, very different than a mission. Think of a mission as the hearts and minds, why you come to work, what we're here to do as an organization. Well, with the balanced scorecard, what we do is we break down that vision. The vision, if that's a picture of the future of where we want the organization to be, well, we need to start determining how we're going to do that. And that's where these 3 themes come in. Here we've got international growth, operational excellence, and energy leadership. Each theme then has a result. In other words, it's a descriptor of what we're trying to accomplish, the outcome of that specific theme. Some organizations call these themes focus areas, pillars. I've heard them called high-level goals or high-level objectives. We call them strategic themes. The strategic themes break down that vision. Again, each theme will have a result. We always advise folks to try to keep it between 3 and 4 themes. In this example, you have 3. If your organization has 6 or 7 focus areas or themes, you may find that it's too broad and too many things fit under that strategy, giving the perception that maybe everything is important. So for that reason, that's one of the reasons that we advise folks to keep it between 3 and 4. And that creates enough balance for you to then be able to manage a good volume of strategy. Now, if you look down at the bottom, we've got what are called the core values. We don't define them here, but we've got the keywords captured here. Again, if you were trying to communicate this in one document, the assumption would be that there's a supporting document that captures all of the definitions and maybe more details. But on one page, this is a perfect place to capture those core values, because core values communicate what's important to us, not just as a leadership team, but that we expect all employees to follow and abide by. Now, this is the map I was talking about earlier. See how you've got the 4 perspectives. You've got financial, customer, internal process, and organizational capacity. Well, this alone, I've seen this utilized by some organizations to communicate the strategy. Of course, it's very limited in that it only communicates some of the objectives and not the measures. Again, a good strategy map is a guide, a visual representation of the strategy. So we start down here at the organizational capacity, and you work your way up, and I'll show you how to read a map in a bit. But we start down here at the organizational capacity because they impact our internal processes. Internal processes then help us achieve the results and create value for our customer. And on the financial perspective, if we're private, then of course it's create wealth for the owners. Now, go ahead. Someone have a question? Okay, thought I heard someone unmute. Okay, so keep in mind that the strategy map, yes, it does end up here in these in the perspectives, but what we're trying to do is have these objectives help us achieve each theme. So in other words, these objectives, if you start down at the bottom, you start seeing how you're going to fix yourself, your internal, capacity, organizational capabilities, your governance, which then in turn provides the opportunity to create better internal processes, and then the value keeps flowing upward, but it doesn't end at the map. In theory, you could then draw a direct arrow to the themes, because these objectives break down those themes. And then, like I said earlier, the themes break down that vision. So what we're doing is breaking down that one single statement into 3 components, which are themes, and then those themes break down into objectives. So you're getting this vision broken down into very small pieces, manageable pieces. Because if I were to say we're going to be a world revolutionizing provider of energy products, you would go in a bunch of different directions and you would interpret that differently. And chances are you'd start creating silos. So that happens many times with high-level strategy goals where there isn't enough definition or detail. People interpret them wrong or the different way than the leadership intended, and we create silos used in strategy, which is the entire point of strategies, to not have silos. It's to get everyone focused, but we need to be careful with that. If your strategy is very vague, then chances are you will have pockets of silos where people just simply interpret it incorrectly. But this is a strategy map, and again, it breaks down those themes. Like we mentioned earlier, can't fix something if you're not measuring it or understand the performance of it. So measures tell us how we're doing with each objective. So in theory, every objective would have at least one measure. You want maybe around 3 measures per objective. So as you can see, if you have 3 for each one, it may get a little tiny, or the font may get a little tiny, because you want to make sure that you pack the correct measures in there. Again, up to 3 measures per objective, you should be fine. Some objectives may require less measures. You may just need 1 for some objective. And of course, the world will not stop spinning if an objective team or a leadership team wants to measure 4 measures for an objective. The key is to capture the right ones. It's as many as you need in order to be able to tell the story of each objective's performance. That's the key there. Projects are the work that we have to accomplish in order to achieve our objectives. Now, this can always get a little tricky in that some projects may impact multiple objectives. That's actually a very good thing. You simply need to capture it correctly, and you can even use what are called indexing of creating a number system for each objective so that you can easily capture that on the initiative side. But a generic one-page document would look very similar to this, where you have all of the work that you need to do to achieve your objectives and how you're measuring those objectives. Again, it doesn't give you the details behind each one, but it summarizes the entire strategy on one document.
Just before you go on, I thought I would share a little bit more about the story on that last one. This document is really useful for implementing new strategies, and this was an energy company that had been very successful on the product side, and they wanted to launch a thought leadership consulting business. Essentially, they one of their goals was, if you're on CNBC and they talk about energy, they wanted one of their experts to show up as a talking head, that sort of thing, that sort of strategy. And so this was a useful tool for them to connect the dots between all the various activities that they were implementing related to that energy leadership strategy. They had thought leadership at the bottom right of the strategy map, driving new products and services that were related to that. They had consulting services that they had to do better knowledge sharing and to drive customer success with that. They had measurements throughout the system that are connected to that strategy. And if you go out to the right, you can see some of the thought leadership, committees they were establishing and research initiatives they were implementing. And so this was a very useful tool for them to connect the dots between the various activities and communicate to their employees how that strategy rollout was going to work. So then we have a couple more examples that have similar stories. So the next one is a nonprofit. We worked with UNICEF and we worked with several other nonprofits in 1 year, and we sort of created this nonprofit version of the one-page map. And you can see how they were implementing an advocacy strategy that on the far left of the internal process perspective. That advocacy strategy was designed to create awareness, and it was even going to be driving the resource cost effectiveness. And so you can see some of the things feeding that, and how it was ultimately driving to some of the outcomes that they were doing a great job of tracking the top perspective when we started. The situation for children worldwide, they could tell you anything about that scenario. What they were wrestling with at the time was, how do we connect the dots back to what we do internally? And so you can see how this picture connects those dots between the strategy map, the simple objectives they're trying to achieve, all those measures they're tracking, and then the initiatives that they're implementing. So then the third example that we have here is a government example. This is based on Newark, New Jersey, the city of Newark. Actually, we work with several cities. Again, we always create generic versions of our teaching examples that are based on several clients. But when Cory Booker was in Newark, they built out this scorecard, and you can see how they were telling a story about government reform and nurturing children and families, going across the strategic themes, public service or public safety, economic abundance. I mean, when you're running a city, there's a lot of considerations, a lot of things that you're trying to achieve. And so if you can tell a simple story that keeps people on track, and so you can connect the dots between a recruitment program and a marketing program. Why is a city recruiting? I want to be able to tell a story about how that will help create awareness of our programs so that we can ultimately increase quality of life. If I can tell that story that connects the dots, it's much more effective and it's much more meaningful for employees than to just say, go work on marketing. Go work on marketing isn't very satisfying. But if you say, I'm helping promote our services so that our citizens are aware of those services so that they have a higher quality of life, if I understand that higher level purpose, it can be more effective. All right, Richard? And you're on mute.
Just to give you a little bit more information on these perspectives so that they make more sense to you if you've never seen a strategy map. The organizational capacity, something that comes up quite a bit is if it's less important than financial or customer up at the top. The answer is no. The reality is it's foundational. In other words, if we can't fix our organizational capacity or learning and growth, in other words, our people, our tool, our technology, our infrastructure, then our chances are our internal process efforts will not be as successful. So we always need to address the organizational capacity first, and that's why it's down at the bottom. It's not because it's less important. It's quite the opposite. It's very foundational. Without the right people, tools, and technology and governance, everything above it starts falling apart. Now, these organizational capacity objectives will drive and help you drive the internal process fixes that an organization needs to focus on, which then drive, of course, your customer and then, of course, your financial. If you're a non-for-profit, the reason we have these arrows here is your customer perspective would be up at the top, and that's why these arrows are here. But in the end, if you're nonprofit, then the end result you're looking to achieve revolves around the customer. If you're a for-profit, the end result you're looking to achieve is around the finances. Now, these themes that I talked about, again, some organizations have these high-level focus areas or goals or pillars. What we want to make sure that you understand is that when reading through this strategy map, you will have objectives. Remember, I talked about objectives connecting all the way up to the top. Well, in each perspective, you would have objectives for each theme that help you accomplish that specific theme. So in this case, we have operational excellence, and the other theme is strategic partnering, and then, of course, build the business. 3 very distinct focus areas or themes. So during the planning, you would address and create a strategy for each theme, utilizing different teams. And then, of course, once you have those detailed plans to achieve each theme, you can then merge them. But in the end, you want your strategy to be a clear plan for how you're going to achieve your 3 or 4 strategic themes. Again, if you have many themes or too many focus areas, one of the ways to test that out is to see whether you're accomplishing these. If you have 7 or 8 different themes, it may be too much for the organization. So just capacity alone may be a quick test that you can do to see if it's overwhelming the organization, or maybe you're not accomplishing any of them because it's so much work that you need to do because of the fact that you have so many themes. You definitely want to make sure that you take a look at these themes, that the themes have objectives going throughout all 4 perspectives, and that they help you achieve your strategic result, right, or your theme result. I just talked about this, that the themes are broad enough to extend through all perspectives. So in other words, you don't want to have 4 or 5 objectives up at the financial for one theme and that's it. Right? You want to make sure that your objectives are spread out throughout each perspective. And then, of course, as you walk them up, they help you achieve that strategic result. Now, I talked about reading a map. Let me quickly go through this. Sorry, my mouse is very sensitive today. So when reading a map from the bottom up, and you can do this both ways, I'll show you how to read it from the bottom up first and top down. But when reading from the bottom up, we want to ask if followed by answering with then. So if we improve tools and technology, then we increase process efficiency. If we increase process efficiency, then we lower cycle time. If we lower cycle time, then we lower the wait time. If we lower the wait time, then we improve customer retention. And if we improve customer retention, then we increase revenue, and so on. Now, some folks prefer to read this from the top down. Top down, we simply ask how. So let's take the increased profitability. How will we do that? By lowering cost. How will we lower cost? By increasing process efficiency. And how will we lower process efficiency? By improving knowledge and skills, and by improving tools and technology. There is not a right way or a wrong way to read this. I prefer to read it from the bottom up, but I'm sure half of the world out there would prefer to read it from the top down, and they can tell a much better story reading from the top down. I prefer to tell the story from the bottom up, but that's just me. Again, there is no right or wrong. It's whatever works better for you as one, the practitioner, the facilitator, or if you're a user of the balanced scorecard or the strategy map, it's what allows you to better tell the story of value that you're creating. Again, value starts at the bottom. So in my brain, it's easier to explain how things at the bottom influence or impact things above it. Again, there is no right or wrong in how you read it. All right, I talked about a discipline, and I mentioned that back when I was first getting started with this, I was looking for a methodology, and I searched what are now my competitors, BSI's competitors, like Palladium, which was a Kaplan and Norton organization. I looked at Playing to Win, Hoshin Kanri, looked at a lot of different methodologies out there. And what I liked about the BSI methodology and Balanced Scorecard in general is that it was a step-by-step process that BSI had created for getting this done. So whether you're using a methodology in the Balanced Scorecard or any methodology out there, I highly recommend you find something that has a disciplined process, because if you're like me, you're going to break something. And I knew I was going to break stuff. And coming from the project management world, I wanted to be able to point at a certain page in a document that told me what I needed to fix or where I went wrong. And most methodologies out there simply didn't do that. And that's why I chose this approach. And it's worked fine for me, so fine that it worked at the organization I was at. And we ended up doing a really good job with implementing it over time. Nothing happened overnight. It took years, right? And that's something that we need to be realistic about. That one-page document is a plan for multiple years. It's not going to happen in 1 month or 2 months. And neither does planning. We need to have an approach where that allows us to plan and be flexible and agile enough to be able to introduce new things even during planning. In this case, we have our 9-step approach. It's a great approach for ensuring that you touch all areas of planning and management. Of course, we have some advanced classes that we teach that hopefully someday we see you in, but we teach people how to do this. We don't simply apply it in helping folks plan and execute their strategy. We actually teach people to facilitate these 9 steps. So again, it's a proven methodology. It's been around for, I want to say, over 20 years. We may be exact in saying that it's 22 years, 23 years, but it's been around, it's been tested, and it's evolved, and it's continuously evolving. Howard, our co-founder, and David have done a really great job of making sure it stays up with the times. As we start moving into this agile world, or keep moving in this agile world, your planning methodology needs to also, right? You need to be able to show value in increments, and this plan does that, in that every step produces an output that you can actually start utilizing early on. So again, very healthy and easy to use methodology that will give you proven results. Now, I threw this slide in here simply to make sure that everyone always remembers that planning is a fun piece, right? It's when we get together at conference rooms and have great lunches or breakfasts and candies and all. But the reality is, once it goes live, the smiles go away, because that's where the work starts. So we need to remember that there are some key components of execution that everyone needs to think about. So having that one plan document is a great introduction to the strategy, but it needs to be supported with a system that allows you to do all of these things. Building the strategy off the strategy management function, or if you're building an actual team, managing all of your projects and portfolios. Imagine a strategy plan that ends, and then 5 months later, someone wants to introduce 6 projects or 5 projects. How do they do that? We need to have an approach for that. We need to have approaches for aligning and operationalizing strategy, improving the outcomes of strategic processes, analyzing and reporting on performance. That's critical to ensure that we're, always selecting the right measures and the best measures, and that we're making progress. And then, of course, all of these help us create a performance culture, which is key and very important for all of us to do as practitioners. If the culture isn't there, especially at the leadership level, it falls apart at the top. If the culture isn't there at the front line, meaning, for example, if people simply don't care about the strategy, your frontline supervisors never see it, your frontline staff has never heard of it, then you're going to have poor results out on the front line. So specific projects may start falling behind, or some KPIs will not move forward because people aren't well informed. So that one-page document ensures that the people that are doing the work, that are working on projects, that are actually making the needles move on these measures, that they understand the strategy. So again, that one-page document helps communicate and ensure that everyone understands what we're trying to focus on and align our folks to goals or processes, systems, projects, and so on. So, but it all starts with that one-page document to ensure that everyone clearly understands what it is we're trying to achieve. All righty.
so, yeah.
Go ahead, David.
I was just gonna say, are there any questions out there? You feel free to either ask your question using the Q&A box or the chat box, or just raise your hand and I can allow you to talk, and you can use your microphone if you prefer that. Any questions? We always get a lot of questions about the recording. I am recording this session. We will try to post that in the next couple of days and give you access to that.
I'll post it up on the website. I'll send a note.
Something, if I can add something to that topic, that one-page document, very important, like I said, to communicate. Something to think about as you move forward is version control. The first time I did this, I tweaked a measure. I edited a measure a few days or weeks later, and now I have 2 versions. And what I found is that KPIs, we always encourage people to find the right KPI, so you're always updating them. So just make sure that you have a way to track versions that you're sending out. What you don't want is to have someone have something you put out in January, but you put out one version every month, and so now people have the wrong information. So just keep that in mind. That version control is very important with any strategic document.
And Michelle, while they're mulling over their questions, did you want to talk a little bit about the event coming up? And you're on mute.
Sorry, sure. I can go ahead and share screen. Give me a sec. There were hands at the beginning. Don't know why there are no hands now.
They can't find the button.
No, I think they were upset that you didn't let them unmute at the beginning. We're ready to talk. All right, so thank you so much for that, Richard and David. I could certainly vouch for the balanced scorecard methodology. I have been using it for close to 10 years, I would say, in different organizations, different industries, both public and private. So it's one to use. I mean, what I've seen in the Caribbean region, and well, what David and Richard has shared with me, it's not just in the Caribbean. Organizations are not so good with strategic planning. Yeah, I mean, they go off, they have their little retreats, and they come up with an operational plan, and they come back, and then they get back to business as usual, and they go back into the operational. And that is where we're trying to build our skill set and competence in the leaders in the Caribbean specifically. That's my ambit. And we want to start doing that through this summit. So it's an annual summit. This will be the first. I want to continue it. And I want to continue my partnership with the Balanced Scorecard Institute, where even outside of the summit, there are various programs, as Richard mentioned, that we offer throughout the year. Balanced Scorecard strategic planning, we do the KPIA, we do OKRs now, we do for both, as I said, government and private, so it can be tailored to custom, or you can join a public class. All right, so feel free to send me an email, shoot me a line, call, register on the website and say what you're looking for, kind of thing. So this short press is just about that annual Caribbean strategy, basically. If you're on LinkedIn, as I said, you would have seen my flyers blazing all over. So our keynote speaker is the Howard Rom, as I like to call him. And I call it also a guru in strategic planning. I posted something just today in terms of some details about Howard and the background. Really, really extensive. You can check it out. Not going to go into details. And then we have, of course, speaking David, there's Terry and Joe, who's not on this particular flyer, but feel free to reach out and we can send you some details. Register soon. We have limited spots, limited seats. It's going to be a hybrid event, meaning part online, part in person. For those who join in from the region, you can either take a flight in, we'll be happy to have you, or you can remote in. And we will have a panel of regional speakers as well joining us in between on what we call a red strap table. And they'll be hailing from different industries, industry greats like Aero LeBlanc, and then we have from Unicoma, we have from BP, we have from TDC and St. Kitts. Again, on the website has all of the info. This is the agenda, here, our detailed agenda. And again, I'll post that up or I can shoot you a line with all of that information in there. So again, we're asking any questions. And I'm seeing a cue from Rachel. Traditionally, strategic plans and strategies are developed by management. What tips can you provide to build a culture where strategy is shared and becomes everyone's business and not only the work of the executives?
That's a great question. We are big fans of opening the floor to bringing more people in. We always like to tell the Mary story. The Mary story goes like this. We were working with one client and we invited people beyond the leadership team into the room to help with this. So Mary was from the shop floor and she was sitting there, not knowing why she was supposed to be there. And it was with a company that had a manufacturing process. And so the first event of our planning session was to have one of the VPs do a presentation on how the manufacturing process worked. And we got about 15 minutes into the presentation and Mary's hand goes up and she says, "That's not how the process works at all." She proceeded to tell him that he was way off base on one of the quality control steps. Anyway, the point was that the light went on for Mary. She was engaged. The rest of the exercise, she was, very involved in the process and really enjoyed it. And she pulled us aside, the consultants aside, and said, "I've worked here for 20 years and nobody's ever asked me to take part in something like this. So you're the first person as a consultant. You're the first person that's really asked me what I cared about, what I thought of this." And so the point is that if you can engage people in the planning process, it will be much more effective. If you just let the executive team go off on a golf retreat and create the plan and bring it back to the rest of the organization, it's not going to be nearly as effective. So you have to map that out. And in our classes, we always show you the basic workshop agenda that we use. But the point is to include a lot of people.
And the only thing I'd add to that is, post planning, the one thing that you may want to try for getting people engaged is to focus on those frontline supervisors. I mentioned earlier that if leadership goes away and does the planning and they hand everyone else a big old binder, then chances are people aren't going to open that binder. So of course the one-page document helps communicate the plan. But something that I found, and it's not data-driven, but it was based on the information we had, anecdotal evidence. What we found is that around 55% of the organization was aligned, meaning that the employees had goals tied to their staff. This was after about 1.5 years of us actually with the full-fledged SMO strategy management office. We had 2 balanced scorecard master professionals and 2 balanced scorecard professionals. And after 1.5 years, we found that we were getting it wrong. And what we realized is that we weren't focusing on the frontline supervisors. Frontline supervisors have a span of control where some of them manage, unfortunately, some manage 15, 20 people, whereas a VP may have 2 direct reports. Well, many times as practitioners, we focus on the vice presidents and the directors because they help create the plan, and many times they are our peers or they sign our checks. So we focus on them. Well, the reality is they're not the people that are going to execute. So what we then started doing is focusing on those frontline supervisors. And once we focused on those frontline supervisors, meaning training them to make sure they understood the strategy, how to write goals for their employees that tied to strategy, we went from 55% alignment to around between, I think we kept it at about 85% alignment. That's a big drastic difference. And all we did was focus the attention from only focusing on leaders to making sure that frontline supervisors understood this stuff we called strategy. So I highly advise you do that, and you'll see that you'll have a big transition or transformation in how the frontline staff see this stuff we call strategy. If not, just like I did many years, I thought strategy was for the leaders only because they're the ones that talked about it and knew it. Well, it wasn't until someone translated it for me that I understood it. So again, it took years for us to figure that out where I worked at. And now that I think about it, it shouldn't have taken more than a day or two to have that conversation about why people on the front line weren't as thrilled about it or understood it or weren't involved. But once they're tied to it in their goals, they're forced to then have conversations about it. So that's if you're looking for huge transformation, I would focus on that one thing alone this year and see where it gets you. You'll see that more than anything else, it may allow people to get involved. Not perfected, but it'll allow people to get involved.
The other thing I would add is that our process alternates between getting a lot of people involved and filtering. In other words, the filtering happens at the leadership level. So you might have leadership team members that are very nervous about opening the doors to letting all these other people into the conversation. They might not want that. You can reassure them by saying, we're going to bring people in on the measurement conversations. We're going to bring them in on the initiative conversations. We're going to help let them flesh out the themes. Lots of work that can be done by a lot of people, but the leadership team can still filter that and refine it as they see fit. Are there any other questions? Richard and I can talk for days about including people in the process if that's what you prefer. Nichelle, you're on mute.
It's just that, but anything else? Anything from you, Deborah, John? I call now persons now. Kivan, Nisha, haven't seen you in a long time. Or Nicolette.
You should
Nisha
put
has a
her hand up.
question. Mhm.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I have to say that, yes, I have actually worked with David Lucy, coming from the Antimatter group. And yes, this is a very, it's a very useful tool. It actually opened our eyes to a lot of things. I'm very glad that I was actually able to rejoin this session just to kind of give me a refresher. And yes, I think you made a comment about the things that actually happen after you guys leave, and that is actually one of the key parts of that. And just to keep that momentum going, because now that I think back at it, I'm like, wait a minute, I haven't seen that document in a while. So it is something that that the thing that happens after, or the momentum that happens after, is basically what you need to concentrate on as well. But it is a very easy document once you actually follow the format. So yeah, just giving my 2 cents about that. So
You do have to carefully manage it afterward. There was one client I was working with. They created the plan, they created the prioritization method, and then the CEO. There was this. They thought they called them black ops initiatives. Anytime the CEO dreamed up a new initiative, he would just sneak in and put it on the list without going through the prioritization process. And of course, it made everybody mad, and it was very disruptive. But we had to work with him on that.
Yeah, Nisha, you can always call in for reinforcements. We're here.
absolutely.
Okay, guys, so thank you again for coming from the BSI and the S+ team, and see you around again later in the month. Maybe everyone will have more time to prepare and make sure and remember the dates, and we'll be good. Bye, signing off for now.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Nichelle. Thank you, everybody.
Nichelle.